Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Life Discussions with Dr. Jefferson. You guys, I am your host, Dr. Jefferson. And if you guys are watching for the first time, I want to welcome you guys in and to let you know that you can definitely come and join the chat on YouTube by clicking the link that's in the description below if you're seeing me on my any of my personal Facebook pages or whatever. So, Life Discussions with Dr. Jefferson is a panel where we have generalized discussions around accountability as it applies to issues that affect the brown and the black community in the United States and abroad. Okay. Sometimes these are very difficult conversations to accept, engage in, have conversations around, and things like that. But I always say that the best place to be viewing the show from is definitely going to be on YouTube because you're able to engage in a more inviting collaboration with the other audience members, and you guys are able to share your thoughts with me, and I can see them. You guys will see them posted, and you can still continue the conversation, right? So today we're going to talk about the difficulties that come along with parenting at different phases of life. I know, like, lots of people think parenting ends when your kid turns 18. However, in today's society, um, we simply don't do what it takes for kids to be able to survive at age 18, where we're going to say that they're now an adult, right? um what if your kid's not going to college, right? So I've had a an abundance of people asking me, okay, so what do I do? My kid's 18, my kid's turning 18, my kid's 19, still not out of the house, my kid's 26, still not out of the house, right? So life is about the different phases of development that these kids go through. And in the black and brown community, the reason that we struggle in these areas because sometimes we have unrealistic expectations of what the capacity of our children looks like. And I think that sometimes we have to be very honest with ourselves and say, you know what? I'm not quite sure that I prepared them for everything that lies ahead. And we have to have that conversation with ourselves around the age 16 or so for our kids. So I'm going to talk about how you kind of gauge that conversation, how you get to it, and all that good stuff. But the first question I want to ask is how many of you who are watching have children? And if you guys are catching me on the replay, feel free to let me know that, hey, I'm a person that has kids, or I'm a person who is intending to have children at a later date, right? Let's see. Let me push this over. So, one of the most difficult things that we don't talk about um, is the alarming rate of death of our young Black people in our community if it's not happening at the hands of police officers. This is something that I think for so many Black parents pushes them away from the idea that maybe I need to do something extra to prepare them for life ahead. So, preparing your kids for obeying basic constructs of laws and regulation and things like that is a part of you preparing them to be 18 and independently going out there and pursuing life on their own and being successful in establishing stability in life. So, when we don't have those conversations, we send our kids out ill prepared to engage in the world around them. And I really think it's very important that we do our due diligence when it comes to our kids because essentially they are our future. um Oftentimes, like in parenting classes, I teach parents to idealize what it would look like when your children are going to move into adulthood and do that early in life. So when they're around 5 or 6 years old, start thinking about, okay, so now I need to develop solid rules and standards of life, which I call expectations, on your boundaries and expectations chart at your house, as to what it is I want my kids to do and how they will earn stars. Stars represent money or income. The workforce right now is so difficult for young people to navigate if they're 18 or 19, simply because post COVID, there are a lot of jobs that are open, but there are not enough people who are willing to go out there and work those jobs and fill those openings because they expect more money to be compensated to them than the jobs are paying. And I don't think it's a difficult thing to idealize that if you're working hard, if you're doing hard labor, you should be compensated at a higher rate. That's not a difficult basic level of thinking, but it's a difficult or unrealistic thought to have if you're a person with no experience, right? So if we're telling our kids early on in life, you have to do something to earn something to get what you want out of life. And sometimes those things may be things that you feel like you're not being adequately compensated for. I think it prepares them for the realisms that are associated with being an adult. Okay. So sending your kids out ill prepared when it comes to financial expectations for stability is asking for trouble. And that's not to say that every kid that goes out is going to like rob a bank or get caught for stealing something, but it is something that does come along with wanting the nicer things in life and not knowing that there are levels to getting to where you need to be in order to acquire those things. So today's short snippet is going to be about things that you can do to improve your odds when you have a teenager who is approaching those later years in life, um, so you can prepare them better for the world they're going to go into and reduce the rate of helplessness, hopelessness, high and heavy distress that leads to suicidal ideology. So, see, your suicidal ideology is a result of suicidal ideation. This is when people wake up feeling like life is so hard, life is so difficult that they want it all to end. And in wanting it all to end, what they're saying is they want the pain associated with the disappointment of life to not be something that they have to live with. As a result, oftentimes kids will definitely commit suicide. They'll go ahead and go the next step and they'll commit suicide. And then you're left as a grieving parent wondering, what could I've done better to have helped my child or prepared them more for the life ahead? Because the reality is, once you sit with it, even though it's not necessarily your fault, that piece of accountability is necessary for you to go through your process of grief and get to a better level of understanding that gives you your proper seating so that you can parent that next child a little bit better, or other kids if you intend to have more kids. But so if your child is in their teens, right? Typically you want to encourage them to get a job, start a job, right? Because the reality is there are less and less kids that are on the work study program, or what is that? The half day you go where the kids are going to work, half of the day going to school, half of the day. The number of kids that are signed up for that program has decreased by 57% over the last 4 years. 57%. If we look at the demographics that represent the Black and Brown community, we're the vast majority of those numbers. So, what it says is that the children that are coming from our homes either have very poor work ethic or they're not ready to enter the world at the time that they graduate, because this is typically where they're getting their real life skills or real world skills. So if we're preparing them, if you're doing your due diligence and making sure that by the time your child is like 14 years old, 15 years old, they have a good starter job and they're in that whole, you know, fit where they're working at least a couple of hours in the afternoon after school, by the time they get to the half day program, they can step that up. And now they're working a full 6 hour, 7 hour day on however many days of the week that they're working. And they're getting their money and they're learning what to do with their money. So you're teaching them how to save, how to take 30% of the income that they're earning and put it to the side for savings. And then the rest of the income be their flexible income where they're spending that, right? So teaching a kid to properly save means you're also taking them to sign up for a bank account. So at 14 years old, all children qualify to have their bank account, right? Of course, the parent is tied to the account. Um, and you're like a joint owner, but it's still something that is very much theirs. I meet too many kids at ages 24, 25 that don't have bank accounts because Cash App exists or PayPal exists, or what is that other one they're always saying? But it's another one. I can't remember the name right now. Type it if you guys know what it is. It's not Zelle, but it's a non-bank account feature where people can transfer money to you, and you can use the money like connected to your Apple Pay and stuff like that without having to actually have a bank account or actual card. But these prepaid systems create a high level of instability for our children cognitively as they get ready to move out into the world, because they don't think realistically. Because at the end of the day, these prepaid cards, these prepaid systems, these money transfer systems, other than the fact that they're highly volatile and highly risky, because kids can easily get hacked and now you can't get the money back. But um is it PayPal? I said PayPal, right? Cash App, PayPal. It's another one. It's another one outside of PayPal. What's going on, official urban therapist? How are you? It's another one outside of PayPal. It's not Zelle, because Zelle is connected to the banks. It doesn't give you a separate card per se, even though it has its own separate app as well. Man, it's another money transfer app though. I'm gonna think about it, because when I was having this conversation, I was because I had a conversation with my teenagers, because my teenagers, all of my children have had bank accounts since they were like 12 years old, 10 at the youngest, and they had savings account much more before that. But Venmo, that's what it is, because it's through PayPal, Venmo. So it's not exactly PayPal, but it's the same. Venmo is the other one. So I don't encourage parents to use. He says, "Do I have Cash App?" I do have a Cash App, but I don't encourage that to be the mode of the basic mode in which you encourage your children to exchange money, because you need to teach them how to save. If you're teaching them how to save when they become teenagers, right? And really, if to go back to my personal way that I do it, I typically start around 10 to 12 years old and just start putting money into a savings account for them, separately for them, outside of their trust funds and that kind of stuff, and bonds. Hey Liz, how are you? If you're putting money to the side for them, and then once they become of age and they're earning their own money from their little job where they're working a couple of hours after school, or on the weekend, what will happen is they'll learn to go ahead and start tallying up. Okay, so I'm going to make this amount of money. This amount mom said goes into savings. So this amount dad said goes into savings, because they know it's 30%. What will happen is they'll be very responsible with the way they use their rest of their money. And I know that in this generation of parents, there is a wide variety of people who were latchkey kids in the 90s. And as a result of that, these people feel like, oh, well, my parents made me pay bills. As a result of my parents making me pay bills and making me be the adult and take care of the household, I'm not making my kids responsible for anything. My question to you then is, how is it that how are you preparing for your child for the world they're going to go in, right? As an adult. So, my topic is, what is your parental responsibility after your children are adults, right? So, if you guys feel like you don't, once a kid turns 18, put that in the chat, let me know. If you feel like you as a parent there is nothing else for you to do once your children get grown, put that in the chat and let me know, because then I have a follow-up question for that's going to lead, that's where this discussion is going. So you have levels to parenting basically, but I like to know what people think, is effective parenting in their own individual practices as to how they raise their kids or how they were taught to raise their kids. Also, if you guys were a latchkey kid coming up, type a one in the chat so I can know which ones know what it means to be a latchkey kid. And if you have not heard of it, if you don't know what it is, go ahead and type a two in the chat. So Kimoji says, none once you're 18, you're grown. Okay, amazing. So that's one. Anybody else on the says Cash App is a great way to teach them to start investing. They can buy shares of stock and build wealth. I say no simply because Cash App has anybody ever dealt with Cash App as far as customer service is concerned? So the best way to invest and the best way to build wealth when it comes to managing your money, but that also kind of goes to, what has been conditioned. Banks have different percentage rates that your money can acquire interest on it while it's sitting in the bank, but also they have money market accounts once you get to a certain level of income or money for you to be able to move around and invest in different stocks and things like that. Also, there are these apps or whatever, like my 12-year-old, he's phenomenal when it comes to investing. But the thing is, if you have to start somewhere. So if you're starting in the bank where it's FDIC insured and you have guaranteed customer service and fraud protection and things like that, that's like in a snap if their accounts hacked or anything like that, because the electronic money system is very risky. It's even risky for adults, okay? Especially when you're talking about mounds of money, acquiring certain amounts of wealth. So it's really important that you help your kids to understand that too at an early age, because then when they become adults, they're not out here with a lack of information and insight as to what to do with their money, how to manage their money, what responsibility looks like. So to go back to my original framework, my original thought, right? When when you are gearing your child up at an early age and you're teaching them about putting 30% to the side in savings of what you're earning on these little jobs, not only are you building work ethic, right? Says the job of parenting does not stop until you're dead. My mother was still giving me advice until she passed away. Hold that thought right there, because we're gonna move deep. We're gonna dive deep into that part. So um not only are you teaching them or building a healthy work ethic, but you're also teaching them that sometimes you have to work a job and earn less than what you're thinking you should be earning after you've been earning money for cleaning up the house and doing your chores and things. Remember I talked about the rewards chart and stuff like that as when they were younger kids. That's what I mean by levels. So they've gone from earning stars on their reward chart and then getting something at the end of the week as a result of having met enough stars, right? Once they move past enough stars and they earn that money, that's allowance. And they're putting that probably in the bank with the money that you're putting to the side in their little savings account and stuff like that. And you're teaching them how to save money, not necessarily to spend it just yet. That first 2 to 3 years. Then though, after the 2 to 3 years, once you send them on their first little part-time job when they get around 14, right? Now, remember I talked about working a couple of hours, they're not going to make a ton of money, but they have some money in savings and they have some money that is in this savings in this account where they're earning it from the job, but they've been able to get through and still buy something to eat, get transportation in moments where you couldn't provide transportation, maybe put a couple of dollars of gas in your car because they know that it takes gas to get to work. So they're on their own. They're learning to be responsible with how they're spending their money. Okay. And I'm gonna get to the comments because I see my producers putting the comments up, but I haven't asked them to put them up just yet. So only the ones that apply to the questions that I ask are we gonna put up now, and then we're gonna address the other questions and the other comments once I'm done with this narrative. So you're if you're teaching your kids how to save money initially and you're teaching them save the bulk of what you got and then spend a little bit, right? By the time they get to that age where it's time for them to start going to the mall, going out hanging out with friends, going to the skating rinks, going to different shows and stuff like that, right? um Thanks, Liz. I appreciate that. This is like one of my faves. I don't know why people like this one, but it's one of my faves too because it got the blonde streaks in it. So I feel like it makes me look younger. Who knows? But so when you So if as we're moving into now the teen years where they've gotten that job and now they are doing the part-time school, part-time work program, right? So they're leaving school at 12 p.m. All right. And like I said, our children, our black and brown children, are the vast majority of that 50 something percent of kids that are no longer participating in this program. So we have to start asking some very difficult questions then. It's, do we value our kids gaining a positive work ethic, or don't we? And if we're people who do, what makes us value this component? And if we're people that don't, why don't we value this component? And what does that mean for our children, our legacies? Because that's what they are. So now you're moving closer to your kids graduating high school between the ages of 17 and 18. If you have an early graduate, the really smart kids, they'll graduate at 15, 16. Um, but by the time they graduate, you guys won't believe it, but they should have well over 25 to $30,000 saved already. So that takes them, it levels them up as compared to their peers. Now they're able to invest in a higher quality car. Their credit is A1, and now it's time to start applying for credit cards and have them listed on the credit cards with you simultaneously, at 16, 17, to build even more established credit. Teaching them to spend now only 30% on the credit cards because you've already saved up all this money over the years, having them put to the side 30% every time they got paid. I know it seems like it, but it is. I mean, I have 7 adult kids now, but it works tremendously. So now when they're going out into the world, instead of you having them ill prepared as they're getting ready to transition into college, they're more prepared because that little money that they've saved to the side and it leveled up as far as like their car that they'll be driving and things like that. They also have a little bit of extra money for money. I mean, for meals and stuff like that during their early years of college, and they don't have to wait until they're a senior or a junior in college. How does a teenager have that much saved with a part-time job? Most adults can't save that. Most adults can't save that. You know why? They're working to pay all of the essential bills in the house. That's why you start when your child is 12 with the savings, right? So you're putting, and I didn't say how much, right? But for me, it's all the standard has always been $100 to $200 a week to the side in their savings account. And then when they start to earn their allowances and put it to the side instead of spending it on ice cream and things like that, because what you're teaching them is how to build flexible income and how to build a separate savings. So you said, do all your children have a 10 to 20,000 liquid? Much more than that, actually. The adults or the younger ones? But so once they get into the stage to where they're making more money, or they should be making more money, because now they should be, having the skills to apply for like a assistant manager job or even a management job if they've been working in retail, retail clothing or even restaurant industry and things like that while they were doing like their little work and half work day, half school day thing. Once they get to that stage of life, it's time for you to start pushing the bigger investments. Because once they invest in a car, you want to see what they select during this transaction. That's why you're telling them to go for a car, because what you're trying to assess then is, what have I taught my child based on modeling behavior, right? Based on my advisements, based on my guidance as to how they should manage and spend their money. I have one of my daughters, and she's interesting. And actually, she's the first one of her type. For her, she refuses to spend her money and she'll sit on loads of money. She refuses to spend it on anything. She said, I'm saving to buy a house because at some point it resonated with her. And she's 16, almost 17. At some point it resonated with her like, I don't have a little money in my savings, right? I don't have a little money in my checking, but I have a tremendous amount of money. And if I continue to save at this rate, by the time I am 18, I can buy me a house outright, because she's always been the one that looked at real estate and stuff like that. And I have another kid who's definitely who's gone into real estate now, and that's her thing as well. but but I think that the more you're teaching them as they get to this age, once you get to the age of 18, when it's time for them to transition out, as long as they haven't gotten into any significant trouble, because it does happen. Okay, they will get into trouble every once in a while. If you have a couple of kids, they always say you got that one. If you have only one child, I pray that you never have to walk that line. But sometimes you have that one, and when you have that one, you have to put a large amount of flexible income into whatever legal defense they need, but also you have to make sure that you're digging into theirs as well, because you need to show them what it looks like for them to be responsible for their outcomes in life. So let's go to how many people thought that. Let's go to the comments, producer. Let's go to how many people thought that parenting is over once the kid turns 18. Only one? Anybody else think that once your kids turn 18, you're no longer responsible for parenting? Okay, so let's just look at the comments and see what's there. Well, wait. Okay, Miss Sandy says banks are the worst place to invest your money. I invest in AMC on Cash App before the Reddit users drove the stock up, and I made thousands. Yes, that's actually one of the options that is no longer really viable now, but you can make that money at the bank too. So if you have a money market account that you use to build your money in and then put it in a CD, you can definitely make that money, Miss Andy. Now, sometimes depending on what bank you use, because I will say for my family, we use military banking. And I know other banks don't typically give percentages accrued from the running balance on your checking accounts. I know they only typically do that for certain savings accounts. I'm not even sure. I mean, I'll have to look at my civilian bank, because I don't put money in my civilian bank, period. Because I don't believe in banks charging me for putting my money there. I will say that, just because it is probably privileged because of the military background. He said, so that's not raising you though. I didn't see that one. I see Kimojis at the bottom, Navy Federal. Yes, Navy Federal is great, but if you what is that? What is the name of that one bank where we started off? It's a military bank in South Carolina. I think it's not South Carolina Federal Credit Union. It may be um, Fort Jackson. Yeah, it's Fort Jackson Federal Credit Union. To me, that is not USAA. Fort Jackson Federal Credit Union in South Carolina, in Columbia, South Carolina. When I tell you guys, if you want a bank that is going to give you the most interest earned on your money while it's sitting there, that's it. That's it. Okay. Now the only problem is they don't have local banks. So you do have to go in. That's why I can never remember the name of it. You have to go into the bank to take your money out and to make deposits and stuff. So if you live very far away from it, yeah, it may be inconvenient for you. But they also have mail-in deposits. Personally, I don't trust the mail system anymore for delivering my not my cash. So what I typically do is transfer the money via Zelle from my USAA or my Navy Federal account. So that's an option. Or if you guys have, if you're not military or military associated, just find a member of your family that has served the military and have them get you in. So Kamoja said that's not raising you though, that's advice. If you're parenting grown people, you become responsible for what happens to them. Okay, so if we go back, let's go all the way back to the top. Let me look at some of those comments because I think that it was Liz. Liz, was it you or Miss Sandy that said that your parents still giving you advice all the way to the end of life? Okay, Liz. Okay, so to go to both of you guys' combined comment, right? Parenting is something that you continue to do until the end of your life. I know that you think, okay, well, this is just advice, right? But it really isn't. Parents have to sit in a position of responsibility for the end of until the end of their life naturally, because especially if your children become parents, right? So if your children become parents, you become the next of kin that is naturally responsible for raising their children. And the only way that you can negate that responsibility is if you raised your child wise enough to know that it's important for them to also have a living will, not just a trust, not just a trust fund for their kids, not just health insurance and life insurance for their kids, but also they have to have a living will. Because what'll happen is if you're the mom of that child, you're naturally the next of kin that's responsible for taking care of their kids. Hey, Money Boy Trey, what's going on? Hey, Joy Chit Chat, how are you guys? And no problem, I had to run because I had this show schedule. But so if you are let if you are properly seated in your understanding about the parental responsibility that you have. Kamoji says, what about the father? What do you mean, what about the father? The grandparents, period. So that means both the mother's mom and dad and the father's mom and dad. So you guys are naturally and what happens is the court will naturally split parenting time between both. Because and especially if it's a person who's closer to them as far as like where you live, because they consider that to be a less invasive transition for the children. But that's also the reason I say it's important for your children to have a living will, because that will alleviate you of some of the stress. But that's still you parenting, because you're teaching your kids the ins and outs of the world that they live in as they move to the different phases of life that life has for them. And if you think about it, even though we think that parenting is about, rendering discipline or something like that and just being responsible for their behaviors or their actions, parenting is about molding, shaping, and cultivating human beings. That's what parenting is. 100%. So you're still responsible for molding, shaping, and cultivating your children's understanding well into their adulthood, late into your adulthood. Because if you look at it, once your children start to go through these different phases of life that you've already now experienced and gone through, even while you were parenting them, oftentimes you'll have a lot of insight and wisdom to give them based off of your experiences that will elevate them and increase their understanding about what's going through. Said, why would you say that your mother and father are still raising you? My father is deceased, and my birth mother was in a different country in my original raising, but definitely this day she contributes greatly to my understanding of especially American culture. So she definitely moves in the parenting role for me, and she has actually in so many ways while I was deployed several times while in the military and attached to the secret services and things like that. During my tours of duty, not only my husband, but she also helped out a tremendous amount. His parents and grandparents helped out a tremendous amount when it came to moving to different countries with us, helping us to do the things that we needed to do for our children because our kids are homeschooled first and they start at 2 years old. So there are a lot of things in place and a lot of different moving parts that they definitely contributed to over the course of my kids' upbringing. So he says, and what part of molding your children stop no woman wants a man say my parents are still raising me? Um, so the thing is, I think the vast majority of people, because pride does get in the way of us recognizing the importance of our parents. I won't say that. And that's one of the reasons for this conversation. Most people forget the importance of their parents and move away from the ideals of their parents and even the advisements of their parents when they get well into their adulthood because they feel like, you know what, I'm an adult. I'm grown. I don't have to listen to what you say. And that's an American problem. That is. Because your parents can oftentimes see where your blind spot lies. And their advisements are very much wisdom and driven by their insight that you're not able to see because you're in your struggle, in your dance of life and things like that. And so when you negate to listen to the advisements of your parents oftentimes as you become an adult and think that because the world is changing because they live in the old school way of thinking and things like that, when you negate to follow their advisements, your parents also know that being a parent means that as you go through the different phases of life, they have to be more involved at one phase, less involved in another. And that role of a parent looks different as you shift through the different phases of development. And so what happens is they'll take a hands-off approach and then let you learn about life. Like they say, I'll let life whoop your ass. If you don't want to, yeah, I'll let life be your teacher. You don't have to listen to me. You know what I mean? I'm going to let life be your teacher because the reality is whether we decide to listen to them or not, life will still force these lessons on you. You will still get those lessons, but it might just be more difficult for you to get them. So Liz says, my late husband's mother was an absolute godsend to me. She was a treasure to me and my children. Exactly. Exactly. But so most young adults want to make their own mistakes. Yeah, so there are some mistakes that your children will still make, even if you advise them. Because the thing is, life is not without missteps in our journey to becoming, right? We're becoming, and Kimoji says that's what I'm getting at. If solely rely on my parents as a grown woman, they become responsible for my outcomes. Believe it or not, they feel responsible for your outcomes, whether they give you advisement or not, because they're parents. Parent the feeling of and you'll understand, yeah, you'll understand it when you get to that age. When you become 60, 70, and your kids are in their 30s, 40s, you will understand the burden of parenting, especially in situations where you could have intervened but didn't intervene, because you will feel compelled to do things oftentimes, but will be reluctant to do so based off of the personality type of your child. And so, what I'll say is this, you know, we don't have to listen to what people advise us to do. We don't even have to listen to the people that are trusted the most by us, our husbands, our wives, the people that we are married to, right? We don't have to listen to them. But the information will be there. So people are tethered to you. You're connected to them for a reason. They're in your life for a season and a reason. Everybody has their purpose, and everybody has the limit of time in which they're meant to be tethered to you. If you decide to piss away the value that they add to your life while they're in your life, once they're gone, in your reflective thoughts or whatever, you will realize, oh my God, if I had just listened to this, and this. That's where the regret comes when people start to grieve. The complications of grief comes from unautomized advisement. So we never, autonomize ourselves so that we can move into a place of security, accepting the advisements of our elders. That's why there is an old wise saying that says, respect your elders and no harm will come to you. It's about the harm of life and experiences. Respecting the people that gain and house the wisdom and insight that's meant to seed and inform your journey. It's a part of the process of becoming. But you can make, they say, if you made your bed, now lay in it. You can make a hard bed for yourself, and you can make life difficult for yourself. And don't listen to those people because you feel like you know it all. I'm not the person to tell you not to. But as parents, your job never stops. And so if you are a person who is continuing that journey of parenting, when your children die, if they do end up dying tragically before you, there are no regrets associated with the job that you did, nor the level of insight that your child had and elevation your child had during their time here on earth. So, what I'm saying is, if you continue the journey of parenting, and if you continue to advise your child, if you set them up well to begin with, once you get to the parenting after adulthood, it won't be so difficult because they will be so independent in this world that the interdependence they have on you will be functional. You won't be so enmeshed to where, as a parent, you're intruding on what their life looks like as they move into life and elevate into different phases and different stages, and the nuances of what it means to live a fulfilled life for them. And they won't make those mistakes because you would have led a journey that told them that in order for you to be calibrated, you must do this. Now, if you do this other thing, that will be your choice. But whatever the outcomes are they will be on you. It's like with me, I don't try and tell my kids how to live their life. I mean, I have one kid that's 21, two actually, but I have one that I'm speaking about that's 21, and he thinks that it's time for him to have a child. His older brothers and sisters that are in their 30s, you know what I mean? Late 20s. But he thinks that he's ready to become a parent right now. Is he married? No. He's dating a girl. He's been dating her for almost a year, not even a full year. Right? So coming to myself and dad, having that conversation, what do you want me to say? You know what I'm saying? If you think that that is for you, if that is the life that you want for yourself, if that's the picture that we've painted for you, that is okay. And his first thing was, I know it's not okay and it's not acceptable, but that's the reason I wanted to talk to you about it, because I just feel like, you know she's the one. And all of my friends are saying that we all need to have kids at the same time so our kids can be able to play with each other. What? Like, what we're not gonna do? Oh, are your kids gonna be paying child support if she puts you on child support? Are your friends gonna be? I mean, yeah, your friends gonna be paying the child support. Are your friends gonna be banging her door down if she decides that, okay, you know what, he's moving on, and whatever it is that baby mamas get mad about? Or do you want to become a baby daddy because your friend said this was the cool thing to do? After that conversation, he changed his mind. Like, I asked him, I was like, well, what does that look like for your college career, for the your money, you know what I mean? Because you're spending a lot of money on this young lady, and I mean, he's not spending small amounts of money, he's spending large amounts of money, right? So, you can't be buying $2,000, $5,000 gifts for a girl, and you've only been dating her almost a year, and you're not even marrying her. Let the gift be a wedding band. So, what if you have a boy that's 13-year old that wants to be a female because they excuse me, feel like they're trapped in a male's body? What would you say to that child? Well, I don't think that I would wake up to that. If that were how my child was feeling, I would have known way before then. Um, but I would definitely have a conversation about realism of his experiences, and I would be asking, okay, so how long have you been feeling this way? What parts of you, have been feeling, like making you feel like you're trapped and things like that. So exploration leads to our understanding of what their experience is, and then I'd support in whatever way it is that he felt he needed to go in after I connect him with an appropriate therapist, because these are issues that typically kids don't feel as comfortable at that age expressing to their parents. And even though I'm a pretty open parent, you know what I'm saying? I can't be my child's clinician. There are ethics guidelines that prevents us from being able to be in that capacity for family members and friends, do a relationship. So he says, no, he ain't ready for children, child real. Let me tell you, like he was just like, I can do it. I've changed that because I have two generations of kids. So he's changed diapers before. He's made, you know, food for the kids. You know what I mean? He's done these things in these recent years, but boy, you're not ready to be a daddy. I'm not ready to be a mom. Oh God. So what makes him think that doesn't he know the risk he's taking? He may have the money, but he will regret it. He's not stable and mature enough. Plus, doing this because his friends are influencing him. Exactly, Kamoji. Right. So my thing in my discussing that with him, that's pretty much what it was. But we left the decision to him, and that's the type of parents that we are. So our parenting style is not necessarily laissez-faire. I think that we have a pretty solid in between, very structured, positive parenting role that we play as parents, in our parental hold on, because we like to prepare our kids for scenarios before they ever get there, right? And we have expanded discussion with our children, which is one of the reasons that I've had people compelling me to have this channel for what 6 or 7 years in the making now. Um, and I started with doing podcasts. The podcast grew pretty phenomenally big. Um, and now I'm doing this on YouTube because for me, I do feel like having the conversations, even the difficult conversations, is a place that I'm very comfortable in. And I don't know if it's because I'm a clinician, because it happened. I was able to have these conversations even when I was working in the capacity of a medical doctor. But I think that I'm a person from my own parents' conditioning and being so open and helping me to know how to navigate life. The preparation that went into my own childhood, I use that with my kids. And we've always been the type of parents that are very curious, because we know that over generations, kids change, ideas change, and things like that. So Miss Sandy says, so you would support him transitioning to a female. I would support his exploration around what the issues there were. Because oftentimes I think that parents miss the fact that children are going through a variety of things as they're transitioning through life. Identity crisis is something that presents about 5 times over the course of their childhood. Five times. So children are misguided about what they feel, who they are, who they're becoming, about five different phases of their life. So not just 5 days, right? But 5 different moments of their childhood. Do you know how difficult that is? And they don't even know they're going through it. People grow up and they never knew they ever went through identity crisis because they feel like they're so balanced. But when I see people who are so opinionated about the other lives of people, right? And I see people who are so moved by what society is going through and stuff like that. And you look at the abundance of people who gravitate to negative entertainment industry and stuff like that. And what is that? Real Life and Real Housewives of New York, Atlanta, whatever those shows are, reality TV. when you see an abundance of society moving to support that kind of stuff, what you realize is that when people went through those different phases of their development, they were so caught up with the social comparison theory ethics, right? That they never came out of those identity crises in a safe, secure place where they could have a safe identity and sense of self. And so we have to understand that they go through those different phases of life because we're meant to be challenged. We're meant to be challenged as to who it is that we are and who we are becoming. Because if we're not pushed to those extremes, we can't truly say that we're secure once we develop our sense of self because we're not explored enough. You said, let's say he was hell bent on becoming a female after all of the therapy you put him through. Would you support him being a transgender? Of course. Of course. If that's where his discernment led him, when it was time for him to make the transition and he got another clinician to sign off, then that's what would happen. Because that means that through his various phases of development, because it starts at 13, they can't make that decision until around 18. So he would have gone through a whole nother two identity crisis then. If he still got that same energy at that point, through those other two different those and the major identity crises, I'm there 100% for and supporting them. Emoji says, I don't think she would accept that. I think she's a nice lady, but if you see how she talks about Kevin Samuels being gay. That's interesting. That's an interesting assumption. So do you think that I have a problem with Kevin Samuels being gay? That's an interesting thing. Let me pull that last comment back up. The discussion of child identifying as trans is a very complicated subject. There are therapists and psychologists who specialize in evaluating trans youth. Yeah, I mean, and I'm one of them. But what I'm saying is, I can't evaluate my own kid. Um, but there are specific things that we're looking for developmentally with the child, as far as like their cognizance around becoming a transgender person and how they identified prior to and what their experiences were as they learned and stepped into the social norms of what their culture were. There are several things, and especially for my children, whatever it is that my children um identify with and they're sure about identifying with, I make it a serious point of contention to support them because I know that there are certain things, certain experiences that they have to experience on their own, they have to go through on their own, they have to make certain decisions on their own in order for them to be healthy in their becoming. Uh, let's see. Mm-hmm. Says, okay, if you had a 13-year-old daughter that wanted a couple tattoos, belly and nose ring, would you support her? We'd have the same conversation. And actually, that's a real thing for me. It's a real thing for me. Um, so I think that children only gravitate to the things that they're exposed to. As you guys can see, I normally don't like during the week. I don't wear, my tattoos aren't visible, right? But I have a breast cancer ribbon here with life here at the top of it, as a result of me surviving breast cancer in 2009. That one is, and it has, what do you call it, leaves on the outside because it's meant to be like growth element and stuff like that. And then here, I mean, I have a lot of tattoos. Most of them are not visible, the vast majority of them. But so for me, tattoos have always been a way to mitigate the pain. Whatever traumas that I've gone through, when I went through various traumas, tattoos were my go-to. That was my coping mechanism, right? And so for my kids, they always knew that, right? They always knew that. Like we always talked about it if I got a new tattoo and stuff like that. So when not only my daughters, but also my sons, I want to say it definitely wasn't 13 because my kids kind of have an idea of what, when, I guess, they're supposed to transition out. They're very much children until it's time for them to be in those different phases of development, because that's how we are, that's how we're structured as parents in my parent system. And so my kids wanted tattoos, I want to say around 16, 17. That's the first time we heard them asking for tattoos. By then, we had moved and established ourselves in the United States, in Atlanta, for those ones that were asking. But um, so in the United States, they can't get the tattoos until they're a certain age, right? So the parent has to sign for them. And so for me, I had several conversations with them. I was like, you know, this stuff does hurt. So let's see how you do when you go and you get your um your immunization, right? If you do well with your immunization and you know you still want the tattoo, let's start looking at tattoos. What do you want to get? What does it mean? So for the vast majority of them, because I've had three that asked before they were 18, 19. Okay. And even when my the first time they got tattooed was was around 1920. And the twins, the 20-year-olds, they got tattooed first, and that was recently in the last year. My daughter and my son. But so to answer the question, we've had that discussion, and by the time we get to what they want, and we're talking about the process of the tattoos and stuff, because that's what I'm saying. I'm a very curious parent. I'm not a parent that says don't do or anything. Like, even when it came to the sex conversation, parents always ask me, like, how did you get to the point where your children are still a virgin as an adult? I'm like, we never discouraged it. You know, so children, human beings, think about the way your brain is manifested, okay, over the course of time. Whenever somebody tells you not to do something, what happens? Just human development, basic human psychology. You're compelled to do that thing. So it's about answers, giving them the answers, exploring the issues with them, having them to give a give their narrative, sitting with and understanding where they're coming from. And these are the things that lead to them doing what you actually want them to do, but you don't verbalize it. It's manipulation. Who sat through that one? There you go. So Kamoja says, well, I watched your video about Kevin Samuels being gay, and it comes off like you don't like gay men just based on how you spoke about him. So I gather what that if your son, I think, was gay, you would feel a similar way. On the contrary, I don't have a feeling either way. Um, I don't have any, yeah, I don't have any quarrels against gay people. I definitely advocate for gay people, alternative lifestyle in general, actually. I'm a huge voice because I feel like people should be authentically themselves, and every person has the right to live their life freely and not be silenced. And whatever that looks like is it's up to those people, as long as they're not infringing on the rights of other people. You know, they should be able to live free. I'm 100% all for it. I'm a free spirit, by the way, so yeah, I'm not judgy on that stuff. But what my coverage on Kevin Samuels entails, so I'm all about the pragmatics. I know that you're more of a newer follower of me, but I'm a pragmatist. So everything that I do, every review I do is around accountability as it relates to what makes sense. And so if Kevin Samuels is a person who is gay, which obviously by his commentary and his references to calling on the LGBTQIA plus community to save him or advocate for him, that says that he's a part of that community. Not only does that say it, but I've had an opportunity to see so many of his videos that indicate the same. As he speaks to alternative lifestylers and things like that. Like I've, I've just had a lot to sit with, and I think I don't know how long you've been following him, but just take a look through some of those videos. You say if your children got married and came to you for advice, and that advice leads them to divorce, would you be responsible for the marriage ending? Um, hmm. Well, responsible or accountable for my role. So I think I would be accountable for my role in that advisement, but I doubt very seriously. Um, I doubt that my advisements will lead to that because, like I said, the way that I advise my adult children, it looks a lot different. And I mean, I've always been an exploratory type of parent anyway, but whatever decision they make is on them. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? So I'm more about exploring the same type of clinician that I am. It's the same type of parent that I am. I'm pretty straight laced across the board. So I'm not judgy. I'm not a person that makes decisions for people. I believe in exploring what your inner capacity for making those decisions for yourself looks like. Let's put that last comment back up. There is intensive counseling, medical doctors chiming in to help a trans person really determine if they are truly trans or if they are experiencing some sort of trauma. Yeah. And the counseling, to be honest, is not that intensive. I think they look at it as iffy, or intensive family intervention is what it's called. They look at it like that, but it's really just us exploring. Back in the day, and not to get too far off topic, but back in the day, the way that they dealt with the in, increasing number of people who were identifying as transsexuals or transgender, or people who felt like they were one sex trapped into another sex's body, right? Um, Back in the day, the way they dealt with it, trying to perform lobotomies, the field of psychology has grown immensely. I will say that. That's all I'll say about that, because that's a whole different conversation. So therapy right now doesn't look like very intense therapy per se, but you do see a practitioner based on the treatment plan. So coming in for gender related issues, or what's called gender dysphoria initially, if that's suspected, it depends on what we consider the common items to be. That's what indicates how intensive, or what the phasal intensity of the treatment plan looks like. That's the easiest way that I can explain it in lay terms. So he says, okay, so I've read that one. But yeah, um I think if you are parenting, to kind of wrap this video up, if you guys are parenting from a place of curiosity, once you become an adult parent, if you have done the preparation, right, the preparedness work in the earlier years of the different developmental stages of your child's becoming, by the time you get to the adult years, you can parent from a place of wisdom and insight, guiding them and shaping what their experiences potentially will look like. However, you have to make sure that you don't overstep boundaries and that you're not making decisions for them, because essentially your children will always have experiences that they have to go through. Like, it's necessary for them to go through in their becoming. Thanks, Liz. And you don't need to be overtly imprinting yourself in their adult life. However, they will definitely need you, because there are very, very sensitive stages of development that children go through as adults, but they're still your children. And the reality is this: when we don't intervene, and when we don't help them through their processes, we contribute to the increasing numbers of suicides that we see experienced among adult people, which is why oftentimes when people don't have adequate support systems, and support systems are the people that they can look to for support, not just family members, because just because you're a parent doesn't mean that your children think that you're a viable source of support for them. And that is 100% dependent on the type of parent that you are during those preparatory stages as they move through the different phases of development, and how well you're cohesive in your co-parenting with the other parent. Because a lot of people look at co-parenting as something that only happens when two parents live outside of one another's primary homes. But co parenting happens when two parents are married as well, because you have different personality styles, different families of origin that contribute to the way that you individually see parenting. So, collectively, you guys have to know how to incorporate the best practices of both and not go so far left as to how you're saying, oh, well, I was raised as a latchkey kid, so my kids aren't going to pay bills, right? Instead, you understand that I have to, as a latchkey kid, not overwhelm my children with the necessary functional household bills, but to guide and shape their understandings of responsibility, and maybe get them a pay. It used to be a pager back in the day for for my older kids, but for my younger kids, it's a cell phone. Get them a cell phone and have them responsible for paying their cell phone bill. Um, or sign up for a recurring subscription and have them paying for that for themselves, right? Which is typically Apple Music for these kids, right? Like, so there are a lot. You said, have you ever overstepped your children's boundaries? No, definitely not. I'm not that kind of parent. Or was that question for me or for somebody else in the chat? Okay. There are just some times where you have to tell your child, hell no. I mean, yeah, you have to, because if you stand firm in your nose, and that's the thing. I think that parenting is never as difficult as people put it, because it doesn't require that level of energy as if you remain balanced over the course of parenting. And it gets easier as you go, even though the phases of development get more difficult for your child. The parenting role, you have to learn how to step back. When they move into those big phases of identity crisis, you have to know, I am not meant to be here in this space. I was meant to parent them, and that looks very different at every phase. And it's going to be difficult for me to see them go through this. But I know that this child has to go through this. You can't compare and say, well, this kid didn't go through it, so why is this one going through it? You know what I mean? Just like for me, like I have two kids that are 31, two that are 27, and then 21, and then the 18-year-old, right? I think he was the first one to ever have to go through heartbreak at, what do you call it? High school. And the boy literally was suicidal. You understand what I'm saying? Because a girl broke his heart. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Right? So for us as parents, supporting him through his thought processes and helping him to gain a better level of insight, right? And get out of his dance, because his dance left him confused, distorted in his thinking. And that's what happens, because we support individuation, differentiation from the system. But guess what? That's what happens when you got the wrong person that you're tethering yourself to, and allowing to align their energy with yours. But that was a necessary experience for him. We had to let him sit through and dissolve all of those conflicts that he had going on in his mind. He was the first kid for us that explored with illicit substances, so like marijuana, all of that stuff. So he had to, and these are things that happened around the same time. So he had to tie in, oh my God, like this must be the thing, the missing component. Like, I've offset my chemical balance in my brain. Let me get to detoxing. Let me get to working out. You know what I'm saying? Of course, he has his brothers that are older than him that help him through that, and all of that good stuff, and dad, and, all of these different people. But it was not outside of difficult for him. Okay. And he's essentially a child that's kind of in the middle, you know what I mean, of his other siblings. So There is a lot, I think, and COVID happened. It's so many things that happen. You said, by your logic, how could any parent raise a man if you don't step in when he's having identity crisis? Oh, you don't step in when they're having identity crisis. Identity crisis is when they're defining who they are based on their experiences in life and what life's taught them at those different phases. So they do that in a couple of times of their lives. They do that when they are going through the identity crisis at the end of early adolescence, and that is around 11 to 12 because that period of time is 9 to 11. So at the end stage of it, because some people start at 8, is around 11 years old to 12 years old. That's when you intervene. Then they go through it again, and between the ages of 14 and 16. And so at the end stage of that thing, around 16, you definitely don't step in there because the attitude, smelling themselves, it starts around the 14, and then they got a little cocky and everything. 15 to 16, they start to be more humble, and they realize that, oh, okay, I could have been listening to my parents, right? So you already have rules that are in place. So you're not developing any new rules. That's the important thing about the you being consistent as a parent through these different phases. So none of the rules change. They don't. The rules have always been the same. That is what allows them to step into their secure sense of self, because once they realize, hell, the rules haven't changed, I have, right? They start to reconsider the way that they have made decisions and what they think they know, right? And then they start to come back around to a sane mind, body, and spirit. And oftentimes, you'd be surprised how they recalibrate. You say he's weak minded, may grow up bashing black women. How do you prevent that? Actually, he has a heavy appreciation for black women. He went through the process of his own realizations after that happened. Um, and we just basically sat through it with him. You know what I'm saying? So his experiences were isolated to that individual, right? And when he moved on to his next relationship, he was pretty creative in that relationship. He's been fine since. But he worked on himself first and his understanding of what relationships look like, and your level of influence on another person, their influence on you, and you know what I mean. You have to work out those things. Miss Sandy says, wouldn't it be smart to step in and explain to him that some females are for the streets and some are wives? um, in a roundabout way, I think that conversation is necessary before you ever get to there. I think that that's the conversation that you have with your kids when they're going through that first phase of development. I don't know how many people realize how important it is at that phase, but that 9 to 11 one, at the end of that phase, that's when you should be having that conversation. You shouldn't be waiting until that one. So he had already had that understanding. He understood that, and he's being, because he's immersed in American culture now. So he was prepared for what American culture looks like before we moved here and settled here. He just had a different expectation because he had been exposed to a different culture for so long. And those other cultures that he was exposed to, they don't look, none of them look like American culture. Let's just put it like that. So he had to come into an understanding and acceptance of the fact that, okay, yeah, this is basically what, you know, I'm dealing with. And I understand why she did what she did. She was exercising her options, right? Because he wasn't having sex and he wasn't going to. So said, did you have it with your son? That wasn't my conversation to have with him. I definitely supported my husband's conversation with him though. Yeah. So some conversations are for him to have and some are for me to have. I'm a very direct parent. So it was very something my husband was like, yeah, you're not having that conversation. You're not doing it. I'm just gonna say what it is. I don't cut any corners, sugarcoat anything. So I'm that parent. Like I said, I'm not the person that discourages anything. I'm the person that is curious, listening, reflective, and, you know, I encourage my kids to live their lives to the fullest and to be free in living their lives, and not worry about the confines of society and things like that. Free spiriting. Says women don't exercise options. That the word is for that is 304. Oh, 304. I don't know what that is. Is that host spelled backward? Almost. It could be. Could be. If the four was a regular four, it would be. No, you see. Well, I think they do though. I've come to the realizations. I've had several conversations with young women here in America, and they feel like they should be okay. So yeah, yeah, and you can't tell these people nothing. So who am I? Enjoy your life. Do live your life free. Do what you're gonna do. Um. So, but yeah. So that is my show for the day. If you guys have any other questions as it applies to parenting and stuff like that, and parenting when your kids are now adults, they're still your kids. You still have responsibilities. Life is not unending, so you don't know what will happen. You don't know if your children will die. You don't know if you will die. You don't know who's going to die, right? So helping your children to be prepared for the world that they would go in and be adults is a part of you being a parent. And then if you find that they were ill prepared, it's a part of you being a parent for you to recondition their understandings of the world that they're now living in and engulfed in before that world swallows them or they get taken advantage of. I'm Finnish American. So if you are a person who feels that the parenting journey definitely is something that ends at 18, more power to you. I hope that your kids are well. um I can only hope for the best, right? um but if you are a parent who believes that you're as a parent you still have responsibilities to continue to mold, shape, cultivate, and guide your children as they are going through their adult experiences in life, then we're on one accord there. Let me know if you got any questions or whatever. You say you're not responsible for them, but you can advise them. They are grown. Somewhat. So you are responsible for paying for the female's first wedding. That's the one. Um, but you're not responsible for their outcomes, though you may feel that way if the outcomes aren't favorable. Oh, of course not. I think that lasted for maybe 2 days. Yeah, no. Mm-mm. He's 18 now. I think that was when he was like 15. 15 or 16, something like that. It was a while ago. Yeah, he's moved on, different relationship, different woman, different goals, different outcomes, you know, all that good stuff. Um, and also like the crisis line for people who are experiencing suicidal ideation or know someone who is experiencing suicidal ideation is listed in the little ticker. So if you do know somebody that is going through the experiences of homicidal or suicidal ideation, don't feel like somebody is gonna judge you. Call that number. There's always somebody there, 365 days a year, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. They're 100% there and available to converse with you and send you out direct help if you need it. Um, and understand suicidal ideation is sometimes something that people struggle with every single day. Anytime you find yourself defeated and you feel helpless or hopeless and you feel like, oh, I don't want to be here anymore, right? That could be a deeper thought in your mind and your unsubconscious of suicidal ideation. If you struggle with getting up and being motivated every single day and just being vital and viable in life in general, that could also be suicidal ideation. If you are a person who struggles with substance use and what it looks like for you to be sober in life without substances that alter your mental state, that could also be a sign of suicidal ideation. So also being exposed to direct exposure to suicidal attempts or completions can also lead to suicidal ideation. So I just want you guys to kind of know what the realities are, and just know that, once one person dies every 6 seconds in America from suicide, that is a serious problem. The numbers of people who are suicidal between the ages of 6 years old, hear what I'm saying, 6 years old to 18, are ridiculous. It says that something is happening with the way that we are parenting our children. The numbers do decrease a little bit as we move on the continuum from people who are 19 to 26, but it's still not a very big difference. So we have to be responsible for the type of parenting that we render to our children, the type of guidance that we render to our children, and we have to stay abreast of what their life experience looks like. And we have to be people who listen to understand what they're going through. We're not here for nothing. So you said the parents are responsible for the wedding, which is traditionally true. What if a man wants to marry a woman that wants a traditional wedding, but her parents can't afford it? I think that is definitely something that man and that woman should discuss. I've seen a lot of people go ahead and put their money together and, you know, pay for their own weddings, but I'm a traditionalist, so it is what it is. So I don't know. Like, it's lots of guys that are willing to pay for the weddings too, but this is just how I function. And that was also the point in putting the money to the side initially before the kids get to the age of 12, where you're now attenuating the money to themselves. So depending on if you have a girl or a boy, that's what that number fluctuation in the number looks like, because you're preparing to marry them off, because one day they're going to get married, right? You know, and if you got a female and a female getting married, both of them are going to be paying. I'm just saying, these are facts. So, but also I often think about the fact that weddings are very expensive nowadays, and what your parents have saved up can go towards your wedding. If you want something bigger, I think that also comes out of your pocket. And kids can get married a couple of times. Like, they don't have to stop with one wedding. So it is what it is. Definitely share my channel. If this content resonated with you, do like the content as well, but definitely share the channel, subscribe to the content, all that good stuff. Hit the notification bell. And I will see you guys back again tomorrow night. And that is all that I have for you guys. Go forth, live free, be great. Don't let society regulate what it is that you do with your energy in your life. Be a positive impact to the people that are connected to you. And if you feel like you can't be positive on that particular day, give yourself words of affirmation that you will overcome the negative energy that is currently in your life and invading your space, so that you can just rise above it and do just that. But that's all I've got, you guys. I absolutely love you guys. Shout out to the chat. You guys are always great and always very supportive or whatever. And thank you so much for those of you who have donated to the Cash App, to the PayPal, and donated to me via Zelle. You guys are amazing. I will definitely be back tomorrow night, and that's all I got. See you guys later. Make good choices. Bye.
To a life can't put me in a box. I redefine any definition you got. I am the tiger, I'm making steps to the top. The flames, I rip it up, you just gotta hand me the rock. Take a seat, you cannot stand it. All I know, the flow harder than a Scotch bunny. Don't try better than me, you cannot manage. This ain't what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon. what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon. I said it, phenomenon.